Our next presenter is Eric Durbin. Eric comes to us via Kentucky, and he is the director of the biomedical informatics. I think his official title is Director of Cancer Research Informatics for Shared Resource Facility at the Markey Cancer Center. The work that he is doing with data collection, data generation, and looking at unique populations, I think is really informative. Having grown up in a really small rural community, I think many of you, if you've not already heard him speak on this, it will be interesting, as well as it fits within all of the CBTN goals, visions, and as you can see also many of the cancer hallmarks. So with that, Eric, I'll have you take over slides.
We'll go ahead and pick up where I left off. So we really started, I'm the director of the Kentucky Cancer Registry, and we really started paying attention to our childhood data through our participation in a CDC project called the Pediatric and Young Adult Early Case Capture Program. And as a result of that, we modified our cancer race info application so that we can actually map incidence data for childhood cancers. And when I refer to childhood cancers or pediatric cancers, I'm referring to kids from the age of 0 to 19 where they were diagnosed. And this map is just showing the incidence of all types of childhood cancer in Kentucky by groups of counties called area development districts. And we're looking here actually at all the data we actually have in our registry database going back to 1995. So we're looking at 24 years of data. But we can see here it's evident that the highest rates of cancer are occurring in our eastern Appalachian region of Kentucky. So in this map, I'm mapping only the brain and central nervous system tumors for the same time period. Again, looking at 24 years of data. And this illustrates one of the challenges that we have, at least from an epi perspective, in trying to use traditional tools, to map and look at incidence rates. And you can see here there are a couple of regions where the rates are marked as unstable. So even looking at brain tumors across 24 years of data for all the patients who've been diagnosed in our state, we still have a couple of unstable areas. And so from this map, it's not really clear that the brain tumors are particularly located in the Appalachian region. And we can also map a larger geographical area and just compare the Appalachian region of Kentucky, highlighted in red here, to the non-Appalachian region. And the rate is higher, although not significantly so. But anyhow, that got us to looking at and looking to compare our rates in Kentucky with the U.S. and other areas to measure a higher burden that appeared to be taking place in the Appalachian population. And so this is a graphic showing the most frequently occurring types of childhood cancer, comparing the U.S. rates in blue to Kentucky in orange and the Appalachian region separately in gray here. And this is looking at a 10-year period of data from 2008 to 2017. Now, a couple of the sites, the rates were actually significantly higher for leukemias and epithelial tumors, but in particular the brain and central nervous system tumors. And this has been consistent when we've looked across different time periods. The rates in Kentucky overall and in the Appalachian region in particular tend to be significantly higher than the U.S. Rates overall. And so this led us to take a deeper look. So we looked at national data. This study is a little bit dated. The data that was available at that time was from 2000, 2011. But we did a comparison looking across all of Appalachia, not just Kentucky. And we found evidence that brain tumors and all central nervous system tumors are higher in the Appalachian region of the U.S. compared to the non-Appalachian regions. And in particular, the low-grade astrocytomas express the highest risk for kids living in the Appalachian region, 41% higher than children living throughout other parts of the U.S. at the time. There's additional data. This is more current data that was published by the CB Trust Group with Jill Barnhart-Sloan and others. And this is also consistent. So they've separated out kids from the age of 0 to 14, and they're comparing the malignant tumors as well as non-malignant brain tumors between the Appalachian and non-Appalachian regions of the U.S. in the malignant tumors, there's a higher risk for children age 0 to 14 living in Appalachia compared to non-Appalachia. And interestingly, for the non-malignant tumors, there's actually a slightly lower risk. And one thing we get concerned about is that maybe that, there's something in the way that we collect data that would introduce a bias. But I think the fact that the malignant tumors are significantly higher here and the non-malignant tumors are not suggests that these data are valid. So yet additional evidence. And I'll skip over a couple of slides for the sake of time. But this is a ranking of rates from 2008 to 2017. And I'm going to highlight here just a number of Appalachian states that we've been working with. Kentucky ranks the 3rd highest in this time period. Pennsylvania, another Appalachian state, the 6th highest. West Virginia is the 10th highest. And Ohio, the 13th highest. So clearly, in these rates, you can see from the graphic here, comparing the 95% confidence intervals, that these rates are actually significantly higher than the U.S. as a whole. And New York didn't highlight New York, but they're also an Appalachian state, and they're up there in the top 12 or 13 or so as well. So anyhow, I think that there's ample evidence that there really is something going on, and children living in the Appalachian region of the U.S. really are experiencing a greater risk for developing a brain and central nervous system tumor. So how do we decided to pursue efforts to address this disparity in Kentucky, and advocacy has really played a really very important role. Jamie Bloy, that I know that some of you are acquainted with Jamie. She's a parent of a childhood cancer survivor and a great advocate in the state of Kentucky. She organized other advocates, and they pursued obtaining funding to support childhood cancer through the state legislature in Kentucky, and amazingly, they were successful. And so the Kentucky state legislature agreed to fund $2.5 million per year for each year of a biennium, so a total of $5 million over a 2-year period, and to make that funding available to support cancer research in the state of Kentucky. And I think this is pretty unusual. There aren't a lot of state legislatively funded research resources. And so I and my colleagues were fortunate to have our own study funded as part of this, to take a more close look at factors that may be associated with the high incidence of these tumors in our population. And so ours, it's a phase 1 study in the first 2 years, and a phase 2 component, and those represent 2 out of 8 studies that were funded through this program at the University of Kentucky. But our first study, of course, we were interested to see or perhaps there were environmental exposures that may explain some of the increased risk here. So that was the first aim of our study, was to take a look at potential environmental exposures. Importantly, we also wanted to take a look at the mutational signatures of these brain tumors in Kentucky children, and to look at genetic risk factors, and to be able to compare Kentucky children with other kids who were diagnosed with similar tumors in other parts of the country. And so part of this aim was to go out and try to obtain a representative set of cancer specimens for genomic sequencing. We collaborated with Adam and his group at DB3 and others at CHOP with some additional support from the Kids First Data Resource Center to pursue that aim. And importantly for us, we knew that it was important to share our data with others. So as we assimilate data, we want to make that data available to others, but equally important was our ability to be able to compare our results with data from other kids in other parts of the U.S. So data sharing was really an integral part of our research plan from the beginning. So I'll share some of the initial outcomes, taking a really close look at the incidence of these tumors throughout Kentucky from 1995 through 2017. We've actually identified a cluster, if you will. It's a large cluster that covers a large number of counties in Kentucky, and the children living in this particular region in Kentucky experience an almost 50% increased risk of developing a brain tumor compared to children in Kentucky who did not live in this particular area. So a very notable result here. And interestingly, not all of the kids were living in the Appalachian region. So it also encompasses the central and the north central region of Kentucky. And so this has led us to consider, possible other factors, that may be available, such as, or could be at play here, such as pesticide exposure, since it does include a more affluent region of the state. But we did compare these results with known environmental toxins that have been released in the air, and we looked at Superfund sites, and we really haven't identified an association with those environmental exposures in these high rate areas. So one thing we had to do, if you recall, the second aim of our study was to collect a representative sample of tumors to generate the genomic profiles for these kids in Kentucky. And I think there are some challenges to overcome. Traditional cancer biorepositories there was no source that we could go to obtain a sufficient number of cases that were representative of the Appalachian population of Kentucky. Cases in existing biorepositories, tend to represent a biased sample because it's kids that are primarily going to academic medical centers for their treatment. And as a result, nothing was available that would represent our particular population. So how did we overcome this particular challenge? So we've relied on the SEER program. We're fortunate in Kentucky to be part of the Surveillance Epidemiology and End Results program, and employing SEER's virtual tissue repository. And this is a relatively new resource that's being developed by SEER to enable truly population-based research using pathology specimens. And so there are a number of VTR registries, and Kentucky is one of those. An important infrastructure component that we actually spent many years developing was the ability to obtain electronic path reports from all pathology facilities who were seeing tissues from cancer patients in Kentucky. And this is actually a map of all those sites that are reporting data to us. So we actually have a population-based electronic path reporting system, which is really critical for this work. We receive a large number of childhood path reports, but because we have the pathology reports, that provides information to the registry so that we know where the residual pathology specimens still reside. Most path labs retain their specimens for at least 10 years. Academic centers, many of those retain their pathology specimens indefinitely. So real quickly, I'll walk through how the Vtr works. We have honest brokers at the virtual tissue repository. We use the registry and our path reporting system to identify the cohort of patients. In this case, all childhood brain and central nervous system tumor patients. With that information, we reached out to various pathology labs and requested their residual tissues, who then agreed and sent those specimens to the VTR. We de-identified those specimens, sent those on to CHOP in the D3B group, who performed the sequencing. The data from sequencing is flowing into Cavatica and then available to our research team and others. This process has proven to be quite successful. We had a goal of obtaining around 250 specimens. And we succeeded in actually obtaining 258. We interacted with 11 pathology labs. 3 of them were out of state. And essentially what this represents is the census of all available tissues for all children who had had biopsy or resection were those tissues that were still available in the pathology lab. So a really successful endeavor. And we believe that this truly represents the kids with these tumors in our statewide population for this time period. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and so that's really set us back probably about a year or so. But we're in the process of working with CHOP to get these specimens sequenced. We're already getting some really interesting results. and CHOPS, the solid tumor panel results are shown here on the left. Whole exome sequencing results are shown on the right. So some really interesting data are already coming to light. Some of our investigators are intrigued by the prevalence of the KMT2C mutation that's showing up in both of these data sets. We've done some comparisons already, looking at RNA-seq data, comparing the pilocytic and non-pilocytic astrocytoma patients and the genomic profiles there, and seeing some differences there, comparing those. So we're really excited about moving into the second phase of our study, where we're going to go out and approach and consent survivors from the initial cohort, and to obtain a germline specimen, a saliva specimen from participants who agree to participate, and also conduct a household survey. And our hope is that with additional germline data and additional information about environmental exposures and other risk factors, that will further enhance the data set that we've begun collecting in the first phase. And again, data sharing is an essential component of this study. I'm pleased to report that we have gotten a very enthusiastic response from survivors and their families so far, and 62 of those have already agreed to participate, and we have quite a large number to go that we haven't approached yet. So I'm very excited about the potential data resource that we're building. So our interest then, it's not just a problem in the state of Kentucky, but we think the problem, and we have evidence that the problem extends throughout the Appalachian region of the U.S. And so how do we expand upon the work and the effort that's underway in Kentucky to also encompass the childhood cancer population in other parts of the U.S. and the Appalachian region? So we propose establishing a regional data sharing consortium. Our acronym is ACCELERATE, and that comes from the Appalachian and Inner City Pediatric and Adolescent and Young Adult Cancer Data Ecosystem Consortium. So clearly that was a stretch to get the ACCELERATE acronym for that group. But basically, we're making an effort to pull together a number of facilities for whom we were already collaborating, and expanding that to some additional facilities. So a number of facilities in and around Kentucky, and also in West Virginia. We were working with the Cincinnati Children's Hospital. They didn't quite make it into a P30 CCDI supplement that was submitted. Unfortunately, we didn't get funded, but it has at least established an opportunity for us to communicate amongst these centers and to try to get something underway. But our rationale is that this group of consortium of participants will be serving this uniquely underserved Appalachian and also inner city children, living in Appalachian states who are experiencing some of the highest cancer burden within the U.S., and particularly for brain tumors. Our ideal is to develop this regional consortium amongst these facilities. We're thinking that we could go after low-hanging fruit, such as collecting existing molecular results from Foundation Medicine and others, integrating those data with cancer registry records. We would also be interested in more detailed EMR data, so SAM's work with standards and how to assimilate that would be applicable here. We could consider, expanding this virtual tissue repository, but it does require significant financial resources and a tremendous amount of work. Other objectives, wouldn't it be fantastic and beneficial if we could provide a molecular tumor board that could serve the regional facilities in this area. We've seen some of the work that Adam and CHOP and so the resources and tools that they developed and made available for their molecular tumor board, and we think that would be greatly beneficial to our patients throughout this region as well. It would be important, obviously, to collaborate with other initiatives. I'm in my institution is engaged with others in the National Childhood Cancer Registry, and so there may be an opportunity to leverage some of that work as well. But the next steps, as we see it, would be important to develop a data sharing framework. Of course, receive appropriate IRB approvals and data governance and how we would approach that, how we could share data amongst the participants as well as groups outside of a potential consortium, and then developing the technical infrastructure necessary to identify and data sources and standardize and submit those to generate a cumulative integrated data set, and of course importantly to apply for future funding opportunities. It's hard to move these things forward without having some sort of funding to support that, as you guys, as the audience, I'm sure, is well aware. A ton of folks to acknowledge, a ton of great collaborators in Kentucky and outside of Kentucky. Adam and his team and Allison and others at CHOP have been particularly helpful and just great collaborators. And that's really, I think, everything that I prepared to share today. Would invite you to check out our annual childhood cancer report in Kentucky. You can hopefully point your phone at the QR code here and download that into your mobile device. But that's a report that we publish annually now. And I would be happy to answer any questions folks may have if we have time remaining.